What will it take to end this war? Tanks, armored fighting vehicles, and much, much more ammunition. John Kirby of the U.S. National Security Council insists that the alliance is still rock solid and all in for Ukraine's defense. John Kirby, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, so the big issue of the day is the tanks, the tanks, the tanks. So first and foremost, the United States appears not to be willing to send its M1 tanks to Ukraine. Why not?
We're still working our way through a myriad of requests by the Ukrainians for capabilities, Christiane, and we recognize that armored capability right now is really important as they fight in the Donbass and as they get ready to fight in coming months over the spring. We expect that there's going to be quite a bit of ground maneuver, which obviously tanks will be very supportive of. But we've made no decisions one way or another. We certainly look forward to and are grateful for the contributions that other nations are willing to give. The Brits have agreed to give some tanks. I know the Germans are talking about it amongst themselves. I mean, those are obviously decisions they have to make, and we have to make decisions for ourselves as well. I would just tell you the Abrams tank is a very sophisticated system that requires a very lengthy, detailed, complicated supply chain. I'm not ruling anything in or out. I'm just saying that, there are some, we want to make sure that as we provide Ukraine capabilities, that it's the kind of capabilities that they can use, and they can use very effectively and in short order.
John Kirby, a lot of people, military experts, actually think that the Abrams may not be any good, precisely because of what you said. It's a gas guzzler. It's all of that. Do you think that's the case, that actually it's not what's needed on the battlefront right now?
Again, we're still working our way through that. I think when you look at, if you just take a step back from just the Abrams itself, when you look at the kinds of advanced capabilities we're giving Ukraine, we have to be mindful that we are not giving them capabilities that they can't absorb readily or effectively. That doesn't mean that they're not smart and capable. They are. We're training them on Patriot missile systems right now at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. But we have to make sure that we keep in mind their absorption rate and their ability to use this material in short order and very effectively against the enemy. The Abrams is a very sophisticated, very capable tank, no question about that. But again, as we work it through, we want to make sure that we're doing this in a smart way.
Okay, so the problem is, and you mentioned allies, it appears that, let's say, Germany, which has the tank du jour, the Leopard 2, which it seems everybody's concentrating on, the Ukrainians want it. It's much more flexible than the Abrams. It's apparently much more suited for that battlefield. And yet it appears the Germans don't want to be the first to send a tank. They don't want to be accused of a German-led escalation. So is this getting down to, I don't even know what to say, but the Germans and the Poles are saying this is just wasting time. Somebody send the tanks already.
Well, I mean, the Brits have already agreed to send some of their Challenger tanks, which is obviously very, very welcome. We want to make sure, and we just had this big meeting in Ramstein last week. Secretary Austin, Chairman Milley, tanks were certainly on the agenda, but you could see from the results of that meeting in Germany how many dozens of nations are willing to continue to support Ukraine with sophisticated weapon systems on the battlefield. And what's really important to remember is that these are national decisions. They're sovereign decisions. I certainly can't speak for the Germans or what's going into their calculus about the Leopard tanks. The Leopards are very good, and there's a lot of them on the European continent, and certainly, they could be effective on the battlefield. But again, what Germany does, they've got to decide. They have to work through this in a sovereign way. That's been our approach since the very beginning of the war. We want nations to contribute what they can, when they can, on the scale that they can. But we're not twisting arms. We're not forcing people to give more than they're willing to give. Each country has national security interests of their own they have to look out. They have their own defense interests that they have to consider as well.
Yeah, but you see, the thing is, for the last nearly a year now, you've all said this is our joint national security crisis, our biggest challenge, our existential mission is to make sure that Ukraine wins and Putin is defeated. That's been your mantra throughout. And now we've got what appear to be, anyway, are being described as, including at the Kremlin by the Kremlin spokesman, a division between NATO allies and a division between NATO and Ukraine. This is playing right into Vladimir Putin's hands.
I would take whatever Mr. Peskov says with a huge grain of salt. Look, NATO has never been more staunchly united than it has been over the last year with this war in Ukraine. And now we're looking at growing the alliance by 2 other nations because of what Mr. Putin has done there. Look, it's a lot of countries in the alliance, and they don't. We're not going to ever agree on every single aspect of every decision that the alliance makes. That's what makes the alliance so strong, that friends and allies and partners can have honest discussions with one another. But to say that this is dividing the alliance or somehow putting international security at risk in Ukraine because there's a discussion over tanks is just way overblowing this thing.
So, as you know, Poland has said and others have said that they want to send their German-made Leopard tanks if they can get a small coalition of the willing to do that. The German foreign minister has said that her country will not stand in the way of other countries doing that should they want to. But in the meantime, is there a difference of opinion on strategy? Let's just put aside the weapons, although it's part of it. But clearly, the Brits, and you saw the British Foreign Minister in Washington recently saying, now is the time. We believe if they get all the weapons they need, all the ammo they need, that this window of opportunity is a time to arm them up and to be able to score a victory this year. But your chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Mark Milley, says, no, not this year. So what is it? Is the United States, I don't know, trying to drag this out, trying to weaken the Russians? Does the United States not think that you can score a victory soon? What is the strategic difference there?
Well, we obviously want to see this war end today, and obviously it could end today if Mr. Putin pulled his troops out. That's not going to happen. I recognize that, but we don't want to see this war drag on one single more day than today. But in the meantime, we got to make sure that Ukraine can succeed on the battlefield so that if and when Mr. Zelensky is ready to go to the negotiating table, whenever that might be, that he can do so with a strengthened hand, that he has success on the battlefield behind him and he's got wind at his back. And that's what we're focused on. And every nation inside this coalition of the willing, as we might call it, is providing capabilities. Sometimes it's just finances, financial support to help Ukraine get into a better position. The strategy on the battlefield, that's got to be up to Mr. Zelensky and his military leaders. He's the one that's going to determine where they're going to strike, when they're going to strike, and with what force. What we're trying to do is, in advance of those operations, and we expect that the fighting is going to continue throughout the winter. It's been a violent winter in the Donbass and into the spring. But in advance of those decisions, Christian, we want to make sure that we are in lockstep with Mr. Zelensky and his military leaders about the capabilities he needs to get there. A great example of this is the battalion training that we're doing outside of Ukraine, but at a battalion level, for Ukrainian battalions on what we call combined arms maneuvers, combined arms operations. Because if you look at the Donbass, a lot of open farmland, open terrain, that's what Mr. Zelensky and his military leaders feel they need to improve, is their combined arms operations in that part of the country going into the spring. And so we're doing that training outside of the country. It's not just the United States, there's other nations involved. And a lot of the vehicles that you've seen us give in just the last 2 weeks, the Bradley fighting vehicles, the Stryker combat vehicles, the MRAPs, the famous MRAPs from Iraq and Afghanistan, those mine-resistant armored protected vehicles, all of those are going to help with the Ukrainian forces in the field, in the Donbass, in the coming months. So we are very much trying to stay ahead of the fight as Mr. Zelensky sees that fight.
Well, you know what Mr. Zelensky sees because they say it all the time. They say it to you, they say it to the public. They say thank you, but they say 100 or 1,000 thanks does not mean 100 or 1,000 tanks. So they know what they want, you know what they want. I guess my question is, do you see, like many strategists, that there is a window of opportunity now to exploit Russia's apparent weakness, its inability, to really double down and take so much territory before what you all say, that they are regrouping for a massive offensive in the spring?
Yeah. We're all mindful of the time component here, Christian, and we know that time is not our friend. and it's not the friend of Ukraine. I mean, we've got obviously winter right now. Weather conditions are not ideal for fighting, and yet fighting continues in the air and on the ground. We have Mr. Putin continuing to strike civilian targets with cruise missiles and drones that he's buying from Iran. And we know, as you rightly pointed out, that he's regrouping and preparing himself for more aggressive operations to come in the next few months, probably in the spring when the weather gets better. So we know we're at a critical point. President Biden has called this an inflection point. So that's why you're seeing so much energy being put in by the allies to get Ukraine the kinds of capabilities they need for these combined arms maneuvers operations that we think they're going to be conducting probably in the next few months. Obviously, we're mindful of that, and that's why you've seen two really big security assistance packages by the United States alone in just the last 2 weeks, and other nations are stepping up as well.